"Dad, what are you doing here?" I just couldn't help but shout because there he was. Dad, lying in the scorching sun in the backyard, inside a broken old tea, like the ones I remember from my childhood. Don't worry about it. It's the usual thing." Dad's weak response left me speechless. Living in the family home, Dad had injured his leg and was now staying with my brother, Stephen, and his wife. Stephen always said Dad was doing fine, and his daughter-in-law Mia would laugh, assuring me she was supporting him. I was told Dad was too busy making new friends at the hospital and enjoying life to stay in touch, especially with his struggles with technology. But seeing Dad so weak and exhausted in front of me, I realized Stephen's words were a lie. Dad slowly raised his hand, pointing towards something. There was I, a single office worker living in the city but dreaming of working in a resort hotel. I moved away from my parents' urban home to live alone in the countryside. My parents, Tanner and Rose, were in a car accident 2 years ago. Only Mom passed away. Dad injured his leg in that accident and was deeply depressed from losing Mom. Dad and Mom, always together, were known as lovebirds in the neighborhood. Dad, an inner person, would travel regularly with Mom, who loved trips. They had the accident on the way back from a trip, and Dad survived alone, constantly lamenting, "Why did I survive and not Rose?" His leg injury and the loss made him retreat further indoors. With my job, I could only do so much in terms of home care. I felt guilty seeing Dad so down, but thankfully I had my younger brother Stephen living near our parents' home. Stephen and his family occasionally checked in on Dad. "Dad's gotten quite weak," I said. "Well, they were lovebirds, it's understandable. We live nearby, so Elena, don't worry and focus on your work," Stephen responded. When I thanked him, Stephen said, "Recently, the recession has really hit our income. We need to start saving. How about you, Elena?" he said with a laugh. "That's tough. Thankfully, the hotel is doing well with the return of international tourists. I have been extremely busy lately with lots of overtime," I said. I had a lot of overtime, but that also meant extra pay, so I wasn't struggling financially. In fact, I have received a raise and believe I'm earning more than most of my peers. The challenging part, however, is the lack of personal time. Stephen had never spoken about financial troubles like this before. He mentioned they have been cutting back on food expenses, nearly reaching their limit every day. He hasn't bought new clothes in over a year and obviously hasn't been able to travel. They wanted to start a family, but even just the two of them were struggling to make ends meet, so having children wasn't an option right now. As I worried about how desperate their situation might be, Stephen said something while we were at his house. "Dad's leg has gotten much worse and he needs some help. We're thinking of living together to take care of him." Mia, sitting next to Stephen, chimed in, "We figured it's a good way to save money and look after Tanner too. It's like killing 2 birds with 1 stone." I replied, "That's really helpful. Please let me know if there is anything I can do to assist." I expressed my thanks then and there. "Thanks. Keep up the good work, Eleanor," Mia said happily. So Stephen's family decided to move in with Dad for caregiving and to save money. Dad and Stephen hadn't always been close. Stephen often stayed out late, and Dad frequently scolded him during his student days. They barely spoke after Stephen graduated and stopped visiting the family home. I rarely saw Dad and Stephen talk as adults, so Stephen's willingness to live with Dad surprised me. It was easy to guess they were struggling financially. I know how significant saving on rent and living expenses can be, living alone as I do, but I honestly felt anxious about whether they would provide proper care since I couldn't visit often due to work. I regularly call Stephen. "How's Dad doing, Stephen?" "He is starting to smile a bit more these days. Is caregiving enough?" "Sorry to leave it all to you," Stephen responded. "It's been 3 months since we started living together. We're getting used to it initially. I felt relieved that Stephen's family seemed dedicated to supporting Dad, allowing me to focus on my work. Years passed, and after summer ended, I decided to visit my parents' home for the first time in years. To invite surprising them, I called Stephen. "Hey, Stephen, it's been a while." "Oh, long time no see. How are you? Think you can make it home this year?" Stephen's cheerful voice reassured me. "Yeah, work's finally settled down. I'm thinking of visiting for a couple of days." "That's right. Drive safely coming back." "Thanks. Let Dad and Mia know too." I couldn't reach Dad on the phone, so I told Steven and then returned to our parents' room for the first time in years. Hey, Steven, it's been a while. Oh, long time no see. How are you? Think you can make it home this year? Steven's cheerful voice reassured me. Yeah, work's finally settled down. I'm thinking of visiting for a couple of days. That's right. Drive safely coming back. Thanks. Let Dad and Mia know too. I couldn't reach Dad on the phone, so I told Steven and then returned to our parents' room for the first time in years. This was the longest I had ever been away from the family home since Mom passed. I worried about Dad and tried to visit as much as I could. But knowing Steven's family was living with him and being really busy with work, I hadn't visited in years. The family home in the city felt even hotter than where I lived. Thinking about the continuing heat wave, I finally arrived, sweating profusely. Then I saw a broken tent in the front yard that I didn't recognize. Was this tent always here? Curious, I approached the tent, but sensing someone inside, I rushed into the house. I'm back, Onar. Welcome back. You look so pale. What happened, Mia? Surprise colored my ashen face. I think someone is in the tent, I hastily reported to Mia, who had greeted me. Then, Mia responded with something unexpected. Oh, that? It's Tanner, Mia answered calmly. What? Dad in a tent on such a hot day? I hurried to check inside the tent. There, Dad was lying down as if he had collapsed. Mia, I'm calling an ambulance. Dad's completely out of it, I said urgently. No need for an ambulance, Mia shouted louder than usual, insisting not to call one. It's Tanner's wish to live in the garden. He's fine, Mia said, something that didn't make sense. Dad wilted on a hot day, wanted to live in the garden? Would Dad, always an indoor person, say something like that? I don't remember him ever taking us camping or to the beach. Even when Mom was healthy, he always said the coolest place in summer was indoors, and the warmest spot in winter was in front of the heater. There is no way Dad would want to spend time outside on such a hot day. I felt something was terribly wrong. I rushed to the tent where Dad was and spoke to him. Dad, what happened? Are you okay? Oh, Eleanor, it's nothing, just the usual. I'm fine, Dad spoke weakly. Do you live out here every day? Why didn't you go inside? I asked Dad, and he slowly pointed to a specific place in the house. It was Dad's room, actually. Since I started living with the Stevens family, they have forced me to live in the closet, Dad revealed. In the closet? I thought they were taking care of you devotedly, I said in disbelief. They never took care of me devotedly. It was just cohabitation for their savings. I kept saying no to the closet because my leg hurts. Then they said if you're going to be selfish, live outside, and they threw me out in the yard with this broken tent, even though it's still hot. Dad continued with stories. I wished I could shut my ears. Steven and Dad were never going to get along well. I blamed myself for trusting Steven. Mia wasn't the type to provide devoted support either. I remembered Steven complaining about her drinking and coming home drunk in the morning after they got married. They don't cook and eat out every day. Taking care of Dad was obviously too much for them, and yet I was foolish to have hoped. This is too much. Don't worry, I'm here now. I was shocked to learn how horribly Dad had been treated by Steven's family. The phone calls made it sound like they were caring for him devotedly, but they actually forced him to live in a closet and then threw him outside. Unforgivable. A fierce anger welled up inside me. Ignoring Mia's words, I called an ambulance. I said there's no need for an ambulance, don't make a big deal out of it. Mia desperately tried to stop me, but I ignored her words. The ambulance arrived and Dad was taken abroad. I joined him. Dad was close to having a heat stroke, but thankfully his life wasn't in danger. However, due to a lack of proper nutrition and being left in unhygienic conditions, he had to be hospitalized. Dad, rest easy and get some rest, I said to him. Eleanor, you saved me, Dad replied. I was prepared to join Rose every day. His face showed relief. What are you talking about? You've got a lot more living to do, Dad. Thinking that Dad had been living each day as if it were his last, I almost burst into tears, but I kept a bright smile in front of Dad. I went back to our parents' home to gather Dad's belongings for his hospital stay. Steven, Mia, let's make sure you understand what's happened with Dad. I confronted them about their treatment of Dad. We just acted badly because we hoped Tanner would leave, Mia confessed casually. Yeah, surprisingly stubborn, didn't want to leave at all, Stephen said nonchalantly. They both seemed aware they were treating Dad terribly. They laughed mockingly as they talked about their harsh treatment, intended to drive him out. Do you realize what you're saying? It's good he's still alive, but if something had happened, you would be criminals, I said, outraged. That's an exaggeration. We fed him and checked on him once a day, Stephen said, treating his father like an animal. He's being hospitalized because he wasn't given proper food. What do you think of Dad? It's his house, and you're trying to kick him out, I said, my anger boiling over. Stephen and Mia showed no remorse and started making excuses. We didn't want to live here. We chose to move in because of financial troubles, but caregiving was harder than expected, Stephen said. Mia added, That's why we tried to put him in a facility. But Tanner really hated the idea of leaving this house full of memories with Rose. They even tried to kick us out, Stephen said, portraying themselves as victims. They wanted to kick Dad out, but when it looked like they might be the ones to leave, these schemes to make Dad want to leave instead. Living rent-free is a big deal for poor people like us. We couldn't let ourselves be kicked out, Stephen said. I never thought they would stoop so low as to degrade Dad's care and living conditions to monopolize the house. I knew Dad and Stephen were close, but I believed that as a mature adult in his mid-30s, Stephen would handle things better. The idea of such a vile scheme was frightening. Moreover, Stephen confessed they locked Dad in the closet and threw him out to make Dad choose to live with me instead of them. Country living is better for health. We were planning to send him to live with you in the countryside, Stephen said. He was more resilient than we thought. We were surprised he didn't leave before you came, Mia said, laughing as if reminiscing about old hardships. Now that Eleanor is back, Dad will probably say he wants to live with her, Stephen said, laughing in a mocking tone. Then, Stephen said something outrageous. Now that Dad's in the hospital, the house is ours. Pack his things and leave. I was speechless at their audacity to have the nerve to say such things while living in someone else's house. I gathered Dad's belongings and returned to the hospital. Dad, I heard everything from Stephen. You've been through a lot, Dad said. I tried to kick them out, but it backfired. The house is my treasure with Rose. I couldn't give it to them. Dad's endearing love for Mom was heartening. Don't worry about the house, I'll take care of it. How about living with me after you're discharged? Dad happily agreed. Thank you. I would love to live with you, Eleanor. After securing Dad's agreement to live with me, I returned home. 2 months later, countless calls came from Stephen. There are a lot of strangers in the house. What's going on? Although Stephen sounded furious, I didn't respond and handed the phone to someone else. The person I passed the phone to was Mom's dad, Grandpa. Hey, Stephen, I've heard everything from Eleanor. Seems like you've treated my dear son-in-law terribly, Grandpa said. Stephen sounded utterly shocked. Our parents' home was actually built by Grandpa in his younger days as a wedding gift for Mom. He had always been fond of Dad like his own child. When I told Grandpa about the whole fiasco, he was furious. He sent several of his strong apprentices to evict Stephen and his family. After the incident, I immediately called Grandpa, the owner of the land and the house. Grandpa, always imposing, was someone even Stephen had always feared. I knew he could handle the situation, so I asked for his help. Stephen, all your stuff has been arranged to be sent to Mia's parents' home, Grandpa said. Don't just go ahead with things, Stephen protested, though still fearful. A man who treats his wife like that has no right to complain. Do you have any objections? Grandpa said sternly. No, I'm sorry, Stephen said, and didn't talk back. After that, Grandpa was always kind to me, a woman, but very strict with Stephen. I remembered how Grandpa used to spank Stephen for crying when we were kids, telling him, "Don't cry, be a man." Well, his normal discipline in the past is now considered taboo. Watching Stephen like that, I felt grateful to be born a girl. Stephen, who had once defied Dad, never showed that side to Grandpa. Even now, he tried to resist a little, but Grandpa quickly took control. Stephen and Mia's belongings were all sent to Mia's parents' home, as Grandpa had arranged. Stephen and Mia arrived at Mia's parents' home. Dad, I think our stuff has arrived, so we came to get it, Mia said. Mia's dad, Kendrick, came out from the back room. I've heard the whole story from Eleanor. Stephen and Mia, you'll be living here with us now, he said. Stephen replied, We'll live at my parents' home. It's fine. Don't think you can come back after doing such things to your father. I'll straighten out your twisted characters, Kendrick said angrily. I knew Kendrick was a very strict man. I had gotten Mia's parents home contact details from Dad and explained everything to them. Mia and Stephen were then forced to live there and receive strict discipline. Mia was taught to cook from scratch and had to prepare 3 meals a day for the family. Stephen obtained permission from his company to work a side job and helped Kendrick with his work on the weekends. After Dad was discharged, Grandpa informed him that the house had deteriorated and needed repairs. Determined to fix the house full of memories with Mom, Dad worked hard on his rehabilitation and recovered. You did great with the rehabilitation, and doctors were even surprised by your recovery, I said. Of course I had to fix the house I shared with Rose. I can't let my spirit falter, Dad said with a brightness reminiscent of his younger days. His love for Mom seemed to be driving his recovery. Under Grandpa's guidance and with the help of his apprentices, the house was gradually repaired. Dad fixing the house seemed to regain the sparkle he had when Mom was alive. Dad, you seem so lively when I fix the house. Memories come back, and it feels like I'm talking to Rose. I used to think she was far away, but maybe she's been protecting me all along. Hearing Dad speak like this nearly brought me to tears. Perhaps Mom really had been protecting him all this time. Eventually, the hazardous repairs were completed. Once satisfied, Dad decided to let go of the house. Dad, are you sure about this? Yes, I feel like Rose is saying it's okay to let go now. I want someone to live in this beautiful house we fixed up. He spoke calmly. I think Mom would be happy about that. Thanks to Dad's and Grandpa's efforts, a buyer was quickly found. With the sale proceeds, Dad and Grandpa decided to move into retirement homes. I started visiting more often. Dad, how are you? I'm having a great time every day. Made lots of friends thanks to you, Eleanor. He smiled happily. Dad seemed to be enjoying his days with the other residents. I began cherishing time spent with my dear Dad more, living each day peacefully. As for Stephen and Mia, we're getting used to Dad's discipline, and it's comfortable in its own way, Mia said. Yeah, it's not always straight, and the house is big and great, Stephen added, seemingly content. Being free from caregiving is actually a blessing, Mia said happily. We're living a good life despite low income. Thanks to that, Stephen acknowledged. Stephen and Mia, accustomed to living at Mia's parents' home, were happy to be relieved of caregiving duties and showed no signs of remorse. Enraged by their lack of repentance, Kendrick eventually kicked them out. You show no sign of reflection. It's time for you to leave, he said quietly but angrily. Wait, Dad, pack your things and leave right now. Kendrick dismissed their excuses and expelled them. Having relied on their comfortable life at the parents' home, they had saved nothing, spending all your money each month. Suddenly homeless and at odds, they set up a worn-out tent in a park to live in until they could afford a place. It's cold. It's all Stephen's fault for his low income that we have to live like this, Mia blamed. The tent is from my parents' home, but I bought a new sleeping bag, so stop complaining. Besides, I'm working 7 days a week with no days off, Stephen retorted irritably. All the money he had earned from his side job was already spent. How about we contact Eleanor and ask to live with her in the countryside? Mia suggested nonchalantly. Let's give her a call, Stephen agreed without objection. They called me and endlessly told me about being thrown out of Mia's parents' home and their current life sleeping rough in a cold park. Stephen, who had once ridiculed my real lifestyle, was now begging to live with me. Unable to bring myself to help someone who had treated Dad so horribly, I, of course, refused to invite further nuisance. I blocked all their future contacts. I could only hope that they would learn that what you do to others often comes back